everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you were like me when I was starting out as an artist, whenever I would go to the art store, I was very confused about all of these words that were attached to the different paint colors I was seeing. I did not understand what Quinacridone meant, or Phthalo, or Ultramarine, or French Blue. Like, what did these things mean exactly? What made it French, and what was what was the Dioxin, and what were all these names? So I went home and I researched them because researching is something I really enjoy doing, and I got a really good education on pigments and how they function and where they lean. So I'll start at the beginning, back in the old cave painting days, because of course that is our earliest example of art that we have. So in the beginning, ground pigments were derived from organic and mineral sources. Some of the earliest pigments were the earth tones, like the browns and the yellows, that were derived from clay and different minerals that were found around the artists. Additionally, Indian yellow was produced from collecting cow urine that had fed on mango leaves, making it a really strongly pigmented yellow. This is something I'm glad that we don't have to do ourselves, because I don't know if anybody would want to be an artist if they had to collect that to make their yellow. So progress is good. Moving on to reds, for like a vermilion color, that is derived from a mercuric compound. Derivative of cinnabar was also used, and then later the cadmiums replaced both of these. Now, you might have also heard of the crushed cochineal beetle from South America being used for the carmine reds. That was very popular and produced a very beautiful red pigment, which again, I'm kind of glad we don't have to do that again. For whites, they were originally derived from powdered chalks and like powdered gesso chalk or lime. And then later, the lead white that you've heard so much about and was so popular for so many centuries came into being. And you see that the most on, when you go to your local museum or anything like that and look at paintings, it's the lead white. Now, when it came to light that lead was indeed very toxic, we replaced it with titanium white, which is made from an oxide that has a very high refractive index, meaning that it causes light to scatter when it's in different directions when hit. So blue I'm going to be talking about a little bit later when I get into the Prussian Blue and the Ultramarine, but the first blue pigments that were really amazing were made from ground up lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. Now, of course, these were extremely expensive and hard to come by, so other people would use azurite with a copper oxide. This produced a very nice blue, but it was unstable, and unfortunately that is the reason why in a lot of Italian art that you might see at any museum you go to, the blues have faded considerably, which is a total bummer in my opinion, but I still think they're beautiful. So moving on to orange. Orange is produced by chrome or realgar, which the realgar was very popular with the Impressionist artists. Greens were, from mixing the yellows and the blues together, but also sap green was derived from buckthorn berries, which I always thought was a kind of a cool thing, because I can just see people just grinding berries, and it seems so natural. I love it. Now, blacks were made from crushed carbonized bones or charcoal, like their old versions of ivory black and lamp black, which were then called carbon black or bone black, based on where they got these pigments from. Later, Mars black, that was made with an iron oxide, and much earlier versions of black were actually made from charred vine leaves, which I find so interesting. Again, I love to just think about these artists looking around and collecting, whatever they thought might produce some kind of a pigment, and just, seeing if it worked and going with it. I just think that's really cool. So, and other sort of amazing ideas for using pigments. For browns, there was a pigment called mummia that was actually derived from grinding up the mummified mummies from Egypt, which I'm really glad we don't still do. Also, they would even use like ground up cuttlefish for that as well. So now those were sort of the early versions of the pigments. So then as the 19th or 17th, no, let's say 18th to 20th centuries come to being, we start to see the synthetics come along, which is a great thing for us. So we'll start with cadmium. So cadmium was discovered by Friedrich Strohmeyer a German chemist, in 1873. Oh, I'm sorry, 1817. It came on the market in the 1830s and the 1840s and was used sparingly due to scarcity of the metal and cost. It was a costly thing to work with. It was said that the cadmium pigments would not fade for 100 years, which made it really, really popular with the artists of the time who were very, very invested in their work lasting. It was used heavily by Monet, also Max Ernst, Joan Miro, René Magritte, Paul Gauguin, and Munch. So cadmium also provides the most durable, brilliant yellows, oranges, reds, so much so that during production, those pigments are actually so bright and so overpowering that they actually have to be sort of muted down a little bit to make them something that we would, like to use. Otherwise, it would just be kind of crazy. So popular cadmiums are cadmium green deep, cadmium green light, cadmium orange, cadmium red deep, cadmium red medium, cadmium scarlet, cadmium yellow deep, cadmium lemon, and cadmium yellow medium. So going on to the blues, I'm going to start with Prussian Blue because it's the first synthetic color of the Industrial Revolution. It was discovered by accident in 1704 in Berlin, which is where, I should say, a lot of the pigments, the names of them, were actually derived from the location they were found, or the person who found them, or things of that nature. So, like if you think about burnt umber, that was created in Umbria, Italy, and burnt and siennas were created in Siena. So you can see that the Prussian blue was made in Berlin, and thus Prussian. So while the chemist was actually trying to formulate artificial crimson, the happy accident of this blue came to be. It's a cool blue, more muted than the phthalo hue, and has high tinting strength and is really beautiful in transparency. It is made of ferriammonium ferrocyanide. Next up is Ultramarine Blue, which I touched upon a little bit at the beginning of this video. It is one of the few mineral colors that is completely transparent, and it has moderate tinting strength. The pigment is comprised of complex silicate of sodium and ammonium with sulfur. Originally made from grinding lapis lazuli powder, as I mentioned earlier, and it was named from the Latin ultramarinus, meaning beyond the sea, which sounds so romantic and beautiful, but it was actually called that because it actually came from beyond the sea. It was imported in the 14th and 15th century by Italian traders from Afghanistan and literally took the sea route, so that's why they called it beyond the sea. It was the very finest and most expensive blue used by the Renaissance painters, and the demand was extremely high, and it was extremely expensive until the synthetic came on the market in 1826. It was first noted that the lapis lazuli was used as a pigment in the 6th and 7th centuries in Afghanistani, Zoroastrian, and Buddhist temples. Now, fantastic examples of ultramarine blue that I just really, really want to mention here are Sassoferrato's Blessed Virgin Mary from 1654. That blue is just outstanding. It's so vibrant and so delicious. I'll put it up right now for you guys to see. Another example of ultramarine blue is on Vermeer's Girl with the Pearl Earring, which is very popular and most people have seen that one. That one was mixed with lead white and then had a glaze of ultramarine blue on top of that because, like I said, it is a transparent paint. Now, moving on, quinacridones. Quinacridones were introduced in 1958, making it one of the newer pigments, and it ranges in colors from a yellowish red to a violet. These pigments were noticed in chemical research since 1896, but was not actually recognized as a pigment until 1955. The range of hues vary from golden yellow through reddish orange, middle red, corals, reds, rose, magenta, maroon, and dark reddish violet. Quinacridone red leans to the pinker side of things, so it's not like a cherry red, it's a little like pinker. Might be good to make, your pinks out of because it's already sort of leaning there anyway. And you can also use it in place of alizarin crimson. Now moving on to dioxazine. It was developed in 1952, which makes it one of the newer synthetics as well. It's a very, very cool purple with a very, very strong tinting strength. It's a delicious purple and I love using it, and whenever I can find an excuse to use it, I will. But I find that purple can sometimes be a little hard to work into things, but that's another story. It is also sometimes used as a substitute for black because it does come so dark out of the tube. So you can use it as a substitute for black too. Next up is naphthol, which is, like I mentioned before, from the Greek meaning mineral oil. It was developed in 1911 and first used by artists in the 1920s. Naphthol scarlet is a very warm, very orangey red, and naphthol red is actually very close to cadmium red. And that's about all that I have for these main pigments. Of course, there are other pigments out there, but these are the ones that I tend to see most often when I go to the paint store. It's really important to get to know your pigments and know what they can create and where they lean. If they lean warm or if they lean cool, then what you can do is really understand the paint that you're going to buy before you buy it. As you start to learn your paints, like what I really recommend is I like to buy my things off of Jerry's Artoramas. It's not a plug or anything, but I like the prices. I like their stock. I think they have a really wide selection of everything. But again, it's not really a plug. It's just personal preference. But what I really love is when I go to buy their paints, because they have this little, I think it's meant to look like a little piece of paper, a little icon that's next to every single paint color they have. And if you click on that, you can look at exactly what pigments were used for whatever color that you're interested in buying. And so you can start to get more of an education. Oh, this one's made with, dioxin, or this one's made from aerolite yellow, or things like that. And you know in advance, is this going to lean more cool? Is this going to lean more warm? Is this going to have an orange tinge or a pink tinge, or what? So it's really helpful to just kind of slowly get yourself an education by doing that, so you can really responsibly pick out your colors and not waste money when you get it home and it's not exactly what you wanted and it's not really working for you. So it does sort of save you time and money in the long run to learn your pigments. And that's all I have for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down below. I love taking your ideas for new videos. So if there's something that you'd like to learn, please let me know. If there's anything you don't understand, just put it down below and I'll see if I can do a video on it for you. Until then, you guys, thank you so much for joining me and have a fantastic week. Happy painting, everyone.